Welcome back everyone to Coach to You. I'm your host, Coach Regina, and I am back with another video. Today's topic, you guys, we're going to discuss the power of our thoughts. On today's podcast, we're going to dive deeply into the intricacy of how our mental and our physical reality is shaped by our thoughts. Now, guys, I want you to stay with me to the end of this video, and hopefully you can pull out some important tips so you can be able to understand the reality that you want to create is right on the other side of your thoughts. All right, so before I get started, let me go ahead and give my disclaimer. Although I'm a student of psychology, I'm not a licensed healthcare professional. All information and content on my channel stems from my own personal experience and extensive research and is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered professional and medical advice. If you feel you have a mental health condition, seek the guidance of a medical professional. Okay, guys, the video won't be long and drawn out. Again, I want you to stay with me to the end, and if you're new to my channel, be sure to like and subscribe, okay? All right, so the power of our thoughts. When we think about our internal dialogue and how it shapes our reality, our health, our success, friendships, and just our life in general, you come to this understanding as to what type of thoughts am I thinking, right? It really makes you want to kind of examine it. Now, keep in mind, you're thinking like what millions of thoughts a day, right? So you're not like examining every particular thought that comes into your sphere of influence. However, the thoughts that I'm really talking about here are essentially the thoughts that you're thinking repetitively, such as you're good or you're not good, such as this is going to fail or is this going to survive, or things of that nature like that. These thoughts send chemical messengers to the body, and ultimately these all signal to your body whether or not you are safe or unsafe. Okay? So when we think about the power of our thoughts, I want you to take a moment and just kind of think for a minute. You know, the last thought that you thought in, let's say the last 20 minutes. Okay? When we think about videos that we may have come across, such as positive thinking, shifting your perspective on thoughts, different things like that. We want to consider cultivating a growth mindset that ultimately uses mindfulness of our thoughts to rewire the brain's response to stress. What this shows is that by changing your mind, you are ultimately able to change your life. Karma is considered action and memory. It is the memory that is stored on the cells and the blueprint of our DNA and ultimately continues to repeat cycles that we're ultimately trying to get away from. But who knows where this stuff derives from? In one of my videos, I talked about how it's ancient, how the collective consciousness and the thoughts that derive from ancient, systems are still in functionality today, and they affect our psyche. Okay, so depending on where you are in different sphere of influences in your life, this is ultimately determining how these thoughts come in, whether they're intrusive or whether they're supportive, as well as the thoughts that you have created in your own life. What I mean by that is when you consider how you navigate reality, right? We come here with our own blueprint, and we come here with our generational patterns and so forth, right? But then there's also what we create in our own life. And when we go about life, we experience, trauma. We may experience bullying. We may experience educational systems and different things like that, work as well. And so what happens is we build these mental frameworks to kind of help us survive. And these mental frameworks can be cognitive, such as I'm capable of doing this. Things always work out for me. My family is supporting me versus, you don't feel supported, right? So basically the neuroplasticity that flows from these thought patterns allows you to alter your self-talk effectively so that you change the mindset and create the life that you desire. So how does this look when we talk about this, right? We speak metaphorically. We talk about, the law of attraction. We talk about the law of vibration. We talk about, all these different things that speaks about physics, right? But when we discuss how our thoughts emanate from within, we're essentially talking about our heart, okay? And what that means in this regard is it's a vibration. Yep, that's what I said, guys. Your thoughts impact your physiological state, as well as they impact your mental state. Okay? Without engaging in the mindful techniques like I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about things such as journaling, cognitive reframing, mental self-talk as well, and journaling. I mentioned that, as well as meditation. Meditation helps to slow those brain waves down so that you're less reactive to life and what's happening around you. Okay. Another thing is being compassionate with yourself. Okay. If you're talking to yourself and you have these thoughts that are going, make sure that you're speaking to yourself as you would a friend. That's something that I had to learn. When you come from trauma in your life, you come from, a background where, your parents were mean. They told you that, where you're not good enough, or you never felt good enough, and things like that. So again, as I mentioned earlier, these mental frameworks, they're running in the background, and they subsequently become noise that affects our way of being and how we relate to reality. One person that had a supportive environment where they come from parents that were loving, very supportive. They show compassion to their children when they failed and different things like that. That child is more adept within their nervous system to be able to handle, the reality that where they're in the workplace or they have a friendship that, when things go awry and things of that nature. Well, on the flip side, when someone comes from an environment that if they told them that they were not good enough, or they weren't supportive or less compassionate, if you will, that child has a tendency that they have built their mental framework around trying to self-please, like people please. They also self-soothe. That's what I was trying to say. Where they find themselves looking for outlets to feel supported because they wasn't supported in their life. This may come from broken relationships, getting into circumstances that are not healthy, risky behavior, different things like that. Okay. So basically, when we look at it from this perspective, our thoughts really are impactful, right? They really are essentially, showing us exactly what role they play in our lives and ultimately how they are beneficial. Emotions, on the other hand, they act as a powerful regulator of the body's bioelectrical system. So if the thoughts are what's sending out the signal, right, then those emotions are actually what regulates the system. So when we change the frequency and the voltage of the coherent versus incoherent signals that we're sending to the field, this allows for our emotional intensity to from experiences to lessen. Okay, but again, this requires work. If you come from a situation where you're constantly reactive to everything that's going on around you, then you are less adept at being able to control that frequency that you're sending out to the field. And in return, that field acts like a mirror and is mirroring experiences back to you. This is something that was very crucial for me in understanding. Nobody's doing anything to us. Ultimately, it is how we are seeing life, and life is mirroring it back to us. Okay? Intense emotional experiences are not just psychological. They are physical discharges of energy. As I mentioned earlier, vibration. Patterns of actions, potentials propagating through our neurons, muscles, and also the visceral. These often precede conscious thought. Thoughts that are positive, such as love, joy, and gratitude, these promote coherent, stable, ordered heart rhythms, right? That align the heart and brain with the nervous system, leading to efficient energy use. Okay? Our brains essentially are like supercomputers. And so basically, because we have trillions of thoughts, I mentioned earlier, I said millions, if you will, but it's a lot, really, that are coming in throughout the day. The brain has to conserve energy by limiting what is brought into your attention on a consistent basis, because if not, it would overwhelm you. Okay? So that was positive emotions. Negative emotions, such as fear, anger, and anxiety, these create incoherent, disorderly, and erratic heart rates and energy fluctuation. And they also consume more bandwidth, okay? This often drains the system and reduces the amplitude of the overall electromagnetic field. So basically, I know this is a lot of jargon when we're talking about physics and how our bodies are essentially communicating for us, right? But here's the deal. If you studied any type of physics in school, and they put that needle and those things went back and forth like that, it's showing you what for every action there's an equal and effective reaction. So basically, in a nutshell, what I'm saying to you is that the thoughts that we're thinking are equivalent to the emotions that we're feeling. And so because of it, it's creating the life that we either want or don't want. What it entails is basically consciously choosing thoughts that help support the neuroplasticity of the brain to help rewire it in a state that says, I am worthy of all that I desire. Life works out for me. Things just naturally, feel good to me, etc., whatever the case may be. Now, initially, these are going to, feel funny, but you're creating the energy of that emotion that is needed to help rewire the brain's system. Energy is considered energy in motion. The word emotion comes from the word immovere. This means to move outward, right? It is the electrical form of feeling. Energy in motion and reorganized into action. So basically, when we feel positive about our life, right, coupled with the thoughts that we're thinking, we feel good about life. It makes us want to do more and feel more. And not only that, we also want to impact others. On the contrary, when you're feeling inadequate, when you're feeling low, when you're feeling low self-worth, disapproval of life and different things like that, it takes a lot of energy to think those type of thoughts on a consistent basis. So basically, by consciously choosing the thoughts, and if you have a down moment, that's fine. Give your brain a moment to say, okay, look, you got about 30, 45 seconds to think these thoughts, okay? Let it run its course, get it out. One of the things I like to do thereafter is I like to do what's called cognitive reframing. I have my book here, and just to let you know, I walk it like I talk it. These is essentially the thoughts that I write down, things that I do, and I do it on a daily basis, guys, where I'm just like every day I write, these things that I want to happen in my life versus how I see things. And because the brain is in behind the skull, it's dark back there. It doesn't have an awareness of whether or not it's real or something happening in the future. The whole concept is being able to feel that emotion of that thought as though it's happening right now. And the neuroplasticity, as I mentioned earlier, it has the ability to rewire that brain and allowing it to, change the course of direction from the way you were born, and especially if it was an impoverished environment, lack, scarcity, fear, constant stress, etc., right? From a neurological perspective, let's look at it from a 90-second rule, okay? An emotion triggered by a thought sends the chemical cascade of norepinephrine and adrenaline. This takes roughly 90 seconds to wash through and out of our entire system. With this being said, if you have this state of being prolonged, this is typically the result of re-triggering the same circuits on a continuum. I know this because I lived in this state for so long. So much so that I didn't even believe that I could actually come out of it. Like, I literally was like, I told my partner, I was like, wow, I want to have a better life. But I knew that I experienced trauma growing up. And so trauma, it's imprinted on the nervous system and the cells of the DNA. And so ultimately the body is literally constantly, playing the same programs from that upbringing as though this stuff is happening in your life right now because it doesn't have any new programs to run. So this is what I was mentioning about, the bioelectrical system, neuroplasticity, and rewiring the brain is basically you're giving your body new data to pick up on a continuum so that it begins to receive this as the new informational input of your desired reality, okay, versus the life that you were living. Now, if you stay with me through this video, one last thing I want to talk about, right, is how blocked energy can affect us. When we talked about the emotions, right, we talk about emotional impulses. When these emotional impulses are repressed, that energy becomes energetic. When that energy is in that state, it's retained in the body as anxiety, tension, and structural rigidity, rather than being released as action or expression. Now, this is very, very key. I generally walk about 4 to 6 miles a day. Okay, people tell me like, man, that's a lot, but they really don't realize that it's essentially 3 miles. But if I want to get back home, I gotta finish up the other 3 miles. So that's what makes it 6 miles. So I'm not just like some dragon out here slaying 6 miles a day. I'm literally, doing what I need to move energy around in my body, and well as keep myself in a flowing state versus that rigid, state, tense emotion. Okay. And so basically, when that energy is flowing, is free flowing, the body is able to, function properly. Your fascia is able to flow, and move in a very, coherent state as well. Another thing is socializing. Okay, when we connect with others during our collective experiences, music, dance, or emotional resonance, our brains and hearts actually synchronize electrically. So basically, being able to connect with others, getting out, laughing, having fun, just doing things. For me, what I generally do is I actually play with my kids. I love to play with my boys. We play karate in the house. I'll be like, hi-ya, just doing different things like that. And they keep me young. For my age, literally 45 years old, they keep me young. And I love that. I'm so grateful for my boys. Um, the other thing, that really, when I think about my kids, I get excited, you guys. So just, but again, the thoughts, the power of our thoughts are very important. I know I get into the technical aspects of it, so sometimes I can lose you. But if you follow me through this video, just understand this. Your thoughts are helping or either hindering you, okay? If your emotions are the energy emotions, right, then the thoughts are the steering wheel. They act as the initial trigger that tells your body which type of bioelectrical frequency to broadcast. That's what I was mentioning earlier, right? So it acts as the spark or the trigger. Every thought that you have is a physical event, a tiny burst of electricity jumping between neurons to neurons, okay? How these neurons fire and wire ultimately determines the state of those neuronal activity. It acts as a chain reaction. When you have a repetitive thought, such as you're going to fail, or your brain releases those neurotransmitters that I mentioned earlier. These chemicals send information to the endocrine system to release hormones like cortisol or adrenaline, right? And they affect the electrical frequency, okay? But if you think about it from the other perspective, right? If you're thinking thoughts that are positive, when you think thoughts such as I am supported, things work out for me, I have everything I need, as I mentioned earlier in the video, you're essentially conducting a high quality electrical tuning to your entire nervous system. So basically, this shifts to a parasympathetic flow. This is the place that you want to be. See, we were not created to stay in high states of fear, stress, anxiety, and worry. Okay, guys? That is the primal state of where our ancestors came from. Okay? So we're basically living our life to try to combat that state, to get to what's called homeostasis. Okay? That free-flowing ability to connect with source through love and light. But it takes inner work. It takes inner trust, and it takes letting go. It takes being able to understand that you are not the one that needs to fight the battle. You're the one that needs to acknowledge that it exists, and it has a right to do so. Once you recognize the repetitive thoughts and you think thoughts of safety and abundance, then you're sending signals to that vagus nerve to deactivate the fight or flight state that came from our ancestors that keep us in a primal state. As a result, your body moves from a high frequency, jagged state of stress to a low frequency, stable state, as I mentioned, of homeostasis. And this is what I was mentioning about the bioelectrical equivalence of changing from a flickering, noisy light bulb to a steady, glowing state of being. Okay? It doesn't happen overnight. When you think thoughts that I am supported, one day you are essentially combating over 20 years of thinking that you are a failure. That is a powerful state, okay? If you can continue to persist in it, day in and day out, that you are worthy, that you're capable of everything that you desire, okay? That is going to change the sine wave to smooth and repetitive. And in that, the field mirror backs to you the coherent rhythm which creates a more stronger and stable electromagnetic field. This basically indicates that you are now open for creativity, healthy relationships, love, gratitude, and all solutions that you may have missed when you were living in a high stress state. The phrase neurons that fire together, wire together applies here. By building the circuit that is supporting one another, you're essentially giving your thoughts, will, and emotions the coherency they need to create the life that you desire. Guys, if you stay with me to the end of this video, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and hit the thumbs up for bell notifications so that I can create more videos like this. Your thoughts are creating a reality, whether you like it or whether you don't. I want you to know that I have to live this life as well as you. I'm here to support you on the journey. I'll create content letting you know that I am Coach Regina. Thank you. Take care.